Hi, I'm Sarah Kim, founder of By Way of Us, and welcome to Back to the Ballot. Typically, we'd be together, but because of the world pandemic, you might have heard about it, we are coming to you virtually from Kim Sing Theater. We would encourage you, and why we're doing it tonight, is because you should hopefully have your mail-in ballot in front of you. If you don't have it, grab it. If you don't have for any other reason, just take notes. We're going to be going through each measure, each person that's on the election, each thing that you essentially can vote for with our expert, Laura Herrera. Thanks so much for being with us tonight, and hopefully we can help you with everything that you need to know. We are really excited to introduce you to our expert, really co-founder of Back to the Ballot, Laura Herrera.
Thanks so much, Sarah. So yeah, my name is Laura Herrera, and I am a resident expert on all things voting, and I have since I was a little girl. Just thought that voting was the coolest thing, and I have dedicated a lot of my life to being an advocate for others, and whether it's my work with this organization called SBCC Thrive LA. It's an organization I'm a board member of. I've also served on the board of the ACLU of Southern California, Planned Parenthood Young Professionals. I even ran for city council in the city that I grew up in Huntington Park, because I want to do so much to improve the lives of others and have the biggest impact I can on the lives of millions of people. Especially in terms of voting, something that I know to be true is that voting is our power. Voting is our way that we can use our voices to be able to elect people who really reflect our values and create the world that we want, whether it's in our own communities, whether it's our country, and whether it's our world. And so many people and all the things that I've done in my life say that voting doesn't matter. That, the decision's already been made for us. It doesn't matter if I vote. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. Especially now with everything that's going on, if our vote didn't matter, then people wouldn't try so hard to suppress it in millions of ways. And so I'm so excited to be partnering with Sarah in this way to really bridge the gap of what people know and understand, not just how important it is to vote, but also what you're voting on. So we've built this WTF is on the ballot guide and this event around having that power to make that decision that best reflect what kind of role that you want. And I, just want to toss out the reason why I'm sitting in my living room and not in the Kim Sing Theater today is really because of 2020. I got the coronavirus a couple weeks ago. I'm at the tail end of it now. And to live through this, to be in the middle and connected so directly to this global pandemic has really changed my life in a lot of ways. And has really just made the reason why we do this so much more important and so much more real. Because I think about the health of the 7 million Americans that have it. I think about the 200,000 people who have lost their lives because of it. And I'm sitting here today as a testament to the work that we do and why it's important and why we're here today. So I thank you so much for tuning in. And we're here to answer your questions. We're here to be a resource to you and to be a guide to you. And I'm just so excited that I can still do this and be here today, despite 2020 and all its madness.
My name is Danielle Dupuy, and I'm the Executive Director of Million Dollar Hood. At Million Dollar Hoods, we map the fiscal and human costs of incarceration. A lot of the conversation in this year's election has to do with divestment and investment. Divest in law enforcement and invest in communities. But what does that really mean? And how can it be justified? Million Dollar Hoods provides a tool to better understand this argument. Through our online maps, we have discovered that millions of dollars are spent every year incarcerating and policing people from just a handful of Los Angeles communities. What our reports show are that the charges that people are arrested on and the most money is spent on have to do with things that are indicative of poverty and public health crises, substance abuse issues, failure to appear, Possession of drugs and possession of drug paraphernalia and DUIs are among the most common charges against Angelenos and where we spend the most amount of money. So if you're interested in figuring out more about the investment and divestment argument, you can use the tools that we provide through our online portal to figure this out. Imagine if instead we invested these dollars into community services and support. Imagine helping communities thrive instead of policing and incarcerating them. Vote this November.
I'm Isaac Bryan, and I'm the co-chair of the Reimagine LA Coalition, and yes, on Measure J. Measure J is the culmination of over a decade of liberation work here in LA County. The movement to stop the construction of new jails led by Justice LA and many others, the movement to establish a civilian oversight commission, the movement to establish an Office of Diversion and Reentry. All of these were foundational pieces that led us to this moment where Measure J entered our November ballot. Most recently, the county launched an Alternatives to Incarceration work group. It was chaired by Dr. Bob Ross and included an incredible combination of both system actors and community voices. And that Alternatives to Incarceration work group put out a report, a comprehensive strategy for how Los Angeles County could move beyond our systems of incarceration and towards systems of care. What didn't happen was the funding needed to build out a continuum of care to supplant our systems of harm and incarceration. And that's where Measure J stepped in. Building off the momentum of the movement for Black Lives, building off the frustration from the lethal encounters with our criminal legal system, with our local sheriff's department, with our local carceral system. Measure J grew as a coalition out of the Reimagine LA Coalition. There are over 100 organizations that have signed on. And what this ballot measure does is it forces the county, it changes the county's constitution to allocate at least 10% of discretionary, unrestricted revenues towards alternatives to incarceration and community investment. It also calls for a community accountability and transparency implementation process. And to get this ballot measure on the ballot, unlike the traditional process where we needed 250,000 signatures, which is really hard to do during a global pandemic, 4 out of the 5 current Board of Supervisors voted in favor of putting this measure on the ballot unilaterally. In essence, they voted to abdicate their own powers and responsibilities back to the voters if the voters decide this is how we want our budget dollars spent. I believe that the voters want our budget dollars spent this way. And it's not just me, it's 100 orgs, like I said, it's also a whole host of elected officials and other folks of influence. One who comes to mind is Senator Holly Mitchell, who's running for Board of Supervisor in the 2nd District. Senator Holly Mitchell is the state budget chair for California, which makes her probably the most knowledgeable person around budgets in the entire country because she oversees a budget of over $220 billion annually. And Senator Holly Mitchell called this measure, Measure J, a floor and not a ceiling. She called it a responsibility, a statement of our values. And it's that statement of our values that we all need to show up for and vote for on November 3rd. Mail-out ballots go out October 5th, but it's critically important. We can no longer invest in the same institutions of harm that have been destroying our communities, and especially our most fragile communities, for decades. Now's the time to invest in systems of care, healing, opportunity. Measure J does just that. Vote for Measure J November 3rd.
Hi there, my name is Godfrey Santos Plata. I'm a candidate for California State Assembly in District 53. I'm here to help you navigate your ballot this November 2020. There's a lot of people out there who don't know a lot of things on the ballot, but if you're voting random, you might as well be throwing away your vote. And so I really encourage folks to do your research in the race. Don't just trust whoever's already in their seat. You've got to ask, what have you done for me lately? Remember Janet Jackson? Listen to her. Here's why that's important. I'm running for the State Assembly. Do you know what that is? The State Assembly is 80 people representing you in Sacramento, making laws about all of our lives. For example, right now, did you know that we could have a legislature with 0 renters in the Assembly right now, that you could be electing to create renter law for the entire state for the next 2 years? Right now, it's important to make sure that you're looking at how someone is voting about tenants' rights and whether or not they're a renter at all. How about education? Last year, so many of us went on strike with teachers all over LA to support better public education here at home. But did you know that the strike earned teachers a class size of 39 people? That's right, the strike that we worked really hard for kept class sizes at 39. That's still too large. And you know who the folks are who can make a difference? The people at the state level. So take a look at your state assembly and your state senate candidates, research carefully, and again ask, what have you done for me lately? And one more thing. If you're disenchanted right now about what's happening at the national level, remember that you don't need a president to make sure that change happens in your communities. Take a look at the ballot for what's happening locally and make sure you get out the vote.
So Aaron Samuels, co-founder, chief operating officer of Blavity Incorporated. You know, in many ways, kind of harkening back to how I felt, you know, when Obama was first becoming president, during this moment or earlier this summer. Again, I felt like a different type of change was possible for the first time in years. And it wasn't just that we were talking about passing new legislation or new policies. I was watching it happen, you know? And, you know, sure, so, some of it may be performative and some of it may not stick. But even what happened was so different than what I'd ever seen. You know, watching Minneapolis vote to get rid of their police department and start from scratch and rebuild and say, we've been doing it wrong. We need to do a different way. Seeing NASCAR remove Confederate flags, seeing Bank of America make a commitment for $1 billion to be donated to the Black community, and seeing the NFL publicly apologize for their stance on Black Lives Matter and what they've done. Now, again, like you could believe some of these things will stick, you could believe some of them won't. But all of those things were previously things that in my lifetime I believed were impossible, that would never happen. Even if this is just step one, I didn't even think we were going to get there. And that all happened in a matter of weeks. In response to the direct and collective action of individuals protesting, both in the streets and on social media, in local organizations, in national movements and gatherings. And I think that there's attraction now. I think that we're just picking up steam. So when I think about what this election means, I'm not just thinking about it as a singular day. I mean, yes, it's important to vote. We absolutely need to vote. It is one of the tools that we have for social change. It is not the only tool that we have. And I encourage everybody, you know, who's been paying attention this year, to look at 2020 as a pivotal moment. This is the year. This is the year that if you didn't know that America was racist, this is the year you knew. And if you didn't know that the way that our country has been being run is not designed to support quite literally the health and safety of our citizens, now we know. So with that, we have a lot of power. We have a lot of power to change that. And I think that we've also learned that too. And we've witnessed the power of collective action and what that can do to change things. So I'm going to be voting. I'm also going to be doing more than that. And I encourage everybody who's listening to do the same.
My name is Jackie Wang, and I am a high school teacher and a yoga instructor and many other things. I'm super excited to be sharing with you guys a little bit about who I am, what I do, and why it's important to vote, and to tell your friends and your family members and everyone you know to vote. I started teaching 7 years ago at a small school in Northeast LA, and I was fresh out of school, and going there I saw two folds. One side was the amazing power of our young folks, and then on the other side, the systems and the structures and the policies that really impede not only them individually, but their families along their education and just personal development and communities. And so that point on, I really made an effort and made it an agenda to not only be a classroom instructor, but to question the systems that are in place that stop our kids and families from thriving the way that they need and that they want. Every day I would walk into the classroom and get to experience the potential of my students, meet their family members, go to barbecues, and really be a part of their lives as much as they're a part of mine. But as we're growing together, I'm also learning more about, again, just the systems and the policies on a more localized level that affect their lives every day. Something like rent control. In Glassell Park, where I taught at, in a span of like 2 to 5 years, liquor stores were disappearing, which, you know, it's, if that's what the community wants, that's what the community wants. But, you know, these staple community like parks were getting revamped, or historical schools were getting split up into 3, and the kids didn't know how to deal with all these changes. Nobody was talking to them about these changes. No one was talking to them about why their rent just spiked up. And they were in, I was living with them in school and through their lives during this rapid transition of gentrification. And at that moment on, I became not only just someone who shares knowledge, but someone who can be a resource where, all right, let's go through the city website and find out when the next city council meeting is. And, you know, I was also learning a lot, and learned a lot through just various people and mentors who done local organizing and collective action. And that's that's where I saw how I could be a resource and a help to our students to protect their communities in the way that they want to, as well as grow and see their communities flourish in the way that, again, that feels right to them and the folks they grew up around. And so thank you so much for having me, and get out to vote.
Hi, this is Lex Stepling. I'm speaking in my capacity as the co-chair of the Committee Against Pretrial Racism. But before I get into what that means and what it represents, also talking about the fact that we are in an election year, and a lot of people are not feeling very powerful about how to vote, what is the purpose of voting, or feeling pushed simply into voting for survival. And that can feel very overwhelming when we think only in terms of national elections. And so I want to emphasize the importance of voting in your local elections, because that's an opportunity to exercise very proactive democracy that will affect the quality of your life, the quality of people that you love's life, and the quality of the people's lives generations to come after you in a way that's very acute and very powerful. Voting locally is an opportunity to access the system in a way that is close to you and can have a direct and a quick impact on the quality of your life, the quality of the life of your loved ones, and of those coming generations after you. It's extremely important to use that power and to wield that power. I'm speaking in a capacity right now to talk specifically about one of the ballot initiatives, Proposition 25, which has been confusing for a lot of people. With many of the other ballot initiatives, there's alignment with regards to how we imagine a progressive would vote versus a conservative would vote, etc. Prop 25 has been far more confusing. The top line of Prop 25 promises to eliminate cash bail in favor of risk assessments. That in and of itself sounds really good, because nobody disagrees that the system of money bail is predatory and exploitive and parasitic. The system of money bail takes advantage of people in their worst moments and profits off of a system of inequity. However, Prop 25 seeks to replace a bad system with a system that's even worse. We're in a moment right now where the whole country is collectively questioning our criminal justice system, from the way policing happens on the streets to the way it happens inside of jails and prisons, and of equal importance, how it happens in our court system. Prop 25 focuses on the unequal system of money bail and seeks to replace it with a system that expands the power of law enforcement, with a system that allows judges to detain at will, expands the power of law enforcement, in particular probation departments, and creates the opportunity for the net widening and further corralling of our communities under the thumb of the criminal justice system in the name of cash bail reform. We're at a moment where we're achieving transformative victories across the country with regards to dismantling the system of mass incarceration and confronting the system of state violence. This is a step backwards. This empowers the state part of the state violence question, while continuing to deny communities the opportunity to create alternative models of violence prevention, alternative models of healing and accountability, and alternative models of care that all communities deserve in the stead of mass jailing, mass incarceration, and mass supervision. In addition to those problems, Prop 25 will proliferate the use of algorithmic-based risk assessments, which is essentially the automation of racial profiling. It allows for risk factors to be identified through a computer algorithm, which will then be factored into determining an individual's right to their freedom. This is an opportunity to codify and entrench expansion of surveillance and expansion of what they call predictive policing, which will allow for junk science and a new wave of technology to reinforce what's already been a racist and classist criminal justice system. We have an opportunity to do something far different. Here in Los Angeles, we were able to successfully stop the expansion of LA County Jail and replace it with a vision that seeks to establish what we call a community-based system of care, in which local government can work in synthesis with community-based service providers and finally address problems as they actually are with regards to mental health issues, behavioral health issues, substance issues, housing issues, and all of the other social determinants that leave people in vulnerable positions that are only made worse by their interactions with the court systems and the criminal justice system. So from police to DAs to judges to jail, we know that all those systems have ever done is make things worse. They've not operated in the interest of public safety. They've in fact made our access and ability to achieve public safety harder, and they've perpetuated the trauma that we're finally chipping away at and dismantling and transforming out of. The idea that a proposition claiming to be one of progressive reform will re-entrench all of those factors that we are finally nullifying is worth rejecting. So in that capacity, I ask that you reject Prop 25 in the favor of visions like the ones happening here in Los Angeles County with the Alternatives to Incarceration Work Group, which includes better pretrial reform and the opportunity to effect more positive change at a state level. Ultimately, we are advocating for the opportunity to finally have communities free of constant encroachment of state violence, which doesn't make us safer, which perpetuates the problem, and disallows us the opportunity to heal and sustain generationally. It's important to remember that the system of mass incarceration, among many of the other harms that it does, is that the family separation has contributed greatly to communities' inability to sustain economically generation to generation. And communities that are over-policed lose that head start that communities that are not over-policed get. And that's a clear example of the privilege that people are calling out and wanting to change in this system.
My name is Emily Sanchez, and I am a student at the University of Southern California and a former Compton Unified student. For as long as I can remember, I have looked forward to the day I turned 18 because I knew that meant that I could finally be able to vote. And turning 18 the same year that arguably one of the most groundbreaking presidential elections is taking place is honestly super exciting. And although it may be exciting, it's a little bit scary. Both of my parents and two of my sisters are undocumented, meaning that they've never voted before. And because of that, I never really got the chance to experience the voting process firsthand or see what lies beneath it. But being a member of the Compton Early College Change Agents has helped me realize the importance of voter registration and voter awareness, especially in communities like Compton where voter apathy is rampant. And I was able to educate my peers and help people who were in the same position that I once was, not knowing really the importance of voting and how to amplify your voice. Many of the policies that we're voting on really impact people of color, which is why it's important that we get out and vote and really stress the importance of this year's election. Statistics have shown that low-income neighborhoods have a lower voter turnout than higher-income neighborhoods. This may be because our neighbors are worrying about putting food on their table, or maybe they're just not really educated about the importance of voting, which is why as youth, we have to stress the importance to our peers and even our parents, our siblings, our neighbors. Being able to vote means that I get to be the voice for not only my family, but others who may be in the same position as them. Voting for the first time this election means that I'm choosing to use my voice, choosing to educate my peers, and choosing to help my community. This November, I will be voting for the first time, and until then, I will be encouraging others to do the same. By sharing my story, I'm hoping to inspire people and see people like me at the polls or at the post office. The Compton Early College Change Agents have really stressed this importance to the youth, and we've hosted various voter registration forums in the city of Compton, and we've registered and pre-registered everyone that's eligible in our school and continue to do so as the years go by. Currently, we are collaborating with future voters of Centennial and the Junior Statesmen of America to host a Get Out the Vote voting rally. And we are hoping to have various elected officials come and encourage the youth and stress them to get pre-registered and registered to vote, and stress the importance of voting and how that can really amplify your voice. And voting is simply just the easiest way to enact change within your community and have your voice really heard by these elected officials. As a person of color and as a first-time voter, voting is extremely important to me, as it should be to you and the youth across the nation, because this is our future, this is our generation, this is the policies that are going to affect us and our peers, and we should definitely get out there and vote.
We're here finally at the main event, going through our voter guide, nonpartisan, but a little opinionated if we're being honest, understanding WTF is on the ballot. We created this together with Laura, who is an expert in all things local politics for a number of reasons, but I'm just gonna let her explain why.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. And there is so much on this ballot, which is why this is so important that we're doing this. And just to give you a little bit more background about me is if you Google me, you can very much find out where I work. I actually work for the Register Recorder County Clerk's Office, which is the LA County office that administers elections. So that's why I know everything that's going on. That's why I know WTF is on the ballot and beyond, and not just because I think it is the coolest thing in the world, but it's also where I work. So, but I do want to say that I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I'm speaking on behalf of @Laura_M_Herrera. That's my handle where you can find me, not at the LA County RFCC. So don't at them if you have issues with what is said today. Go ahead and find me, at me, and then we can go ahead and talk about it. So I'm just super excited to just go through this ballot and talk about all of the different options that a voter has to be able to cast their ballot. I know you all have heard of a few things, all of these changes. You know, LA County did an amazing job in the presidential primary election to redesign how people vote, to make it easier for people to vote, and then Corona happened. So there are a lot of other changes that make it easy for you to make sure that you still cast your ballot in the way that you want to. So just want to put it on your radar. All registered voters are going to receive their ballot in the mail this election. So starting the first week of October, you should have received your ballot at that address that you're registered to vote. So if you are watching this, it's October 12th, you still haven't gotten your ballot, make sure that you contact the Register Recorder County Clerk's Office. You can actually request to get your ballot if you didn't get it in the mail just yet, or you can also still register to vote and get your ballot by October 19th. So just make sure that you build your voter game plan for this year. So if you want to go and vote by mail, you can do so easily and safely. What's really dope is that you actually don't even have to pay postage. All postage is included. You don't even have to put a stamp on it. It's completely free. You can mail it back. As long as it's mailed back by November 3rd, you are good to go. You can also drop off your ballot at any 400 drop-off location located anywhere in the county. So you'll see them. They're pretty cool. They're pretty dope. They're branded for the RCC, and it's directly for you to be able to drop off your ballot, and you can actually just get your ballot directly back to the RCC. So you don't even have to mail it if you don't want to. If you want to still vote in person, or if there was an issue with your ballot in any way, there's still going to be 500 to 800 vote centers that are available starting 11 days before election day. So I'm sorry, a full 11 days. So 10 days before election day, which is October 24th, that's when people can actually go and start voting in person. And then it'll ramp up where all of the vote centers are going to be open starting October 29th, which is 5 full days through election day. So our advice is vote early. Whether you're going to vote early using your ballot that is mailed to you, or you're going to vote early if you go in person. So at vote centers, because of Corona, there's obviously going to be social distancing regulations. You're going to have to wear a mask, and there's going to be tons of PPE for voters and for election workers who are going to be there. We want to make sure that your vote is counted, that you have the opportunity to vote, but you have to do so safely. So it's really about making sure that you build your voter game plan. Are you going to vote by yourself? Are you going to vote in person? Are you going to vote by mail? It is designed for you to choose the best way for you to cast your vote. So I don't know, do you have any questions, Sarah? Anything you want to bring up before we get into this ballot, or where are you at? Where are we at?
I think that if you don't already have this PDF, this guide in front of you, you can go to byway.us, BYWAY.us, we have a tab on the top that says download the voter guide right here. So you can download it. Make sure you have it in front of you if you want to follow along and take notes. If you don't, all good, totally up to you, your discretion. I would just say make sure you have your mail-in ballot or something you can take notes with. Yes, no, for, against, any of that stuff. We don't care who you vote for, a little bit. We just care that you do.
Just make sure that you vote.
Exactly. So that's the only call out. Laura, you can just go ahead and dive in.
Yeah, let's do this. So even before we get started, just so you know, we're here to really answer a lot of the questions that you have, about starting with who the F is on this ballot. So obviously, on the top of everyone's minds, we're thinking about the presidential general election. This is probably one of the most important elections of our lifetime, certainly. Everyone's thinking about that presidential election, but there are so many candidates and measures and propositions on this ballot. And we just want to go through and talk about, what's on the ballot on the local level. It is so important that you know and understand who your local representatives are, because they really are the ones who impact your life on a daily basis. So there's an elected representative that impacts every single part of your life. So whether it's someone who's throwing away your trash, who's filling in that pothole that ruins your life every time you run over it on your street, who are the folks who even turn the water on that comes out of your faucet, to the electricity that comes through your life. Every single part of our lives is dictated and decided by a body of representatives that we elect. So we just wanted to go through and talk about, starting at that local level, who are city councils and what do mayors do? Just to really contextualize, these are the people who are representing the city that you live in. So like, what do they do? Essentially, the services that impact your life on a daily basis, like I said, garbage disposal, street maintenance, local law enforcement, huge, right? Those are the people who you elect at the city council level. So in the city of LA, there are 2 council districts, 2 and 4, that are actually on the ballot. This is a general election. So this is a lot of the races that are on the ballot are runoffs, meaning that in the primary election, it got narrowed down from a lot of candidates to the top 2 candidates. And so essentially, LA City Council districts 2 and 4 are on the ballot, and it's essentially up to you who you want to elect, depending on which council district you live in. That may be the race that appears on the ballot. And just so you know, speaking about the county, there are 88 total cities in LA County, and 48 out of the 88 cities have races that appear on this ballot. So depending on where you live, you may have a city council race that's up on the ballot. I don't know, Sarah, any questions about, local level impact, who we're talking to?
So my question is, there will be potentially these on our voter guide. We have District 2 and District 4, but there's the potential that people who have their mail-in ballot in front of them right now might have different names, or might have someone that's not in 2 or 4, right? Depending on what district you're in. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically where you live, where you're registered to vote is what ballot candidates and measures that will appear on your ballot. So essentially, depending on the city, depending on the county, depending on the state, those all dictate, what races you actually have the ability to vote on. So everyone in the United States is going to be able to vote on president, right? But you're going to vote on your local congressional members, your local state representatives, and your local level representatives. So based on where you live, that's exactly who you're going to see on your ballot. So to go through it and just to go down, we also are dealing with lots of unified school boards, where, LAUSD is the largest school district in the state of California. It's actually the 2nd largest in the entire country. So much of LA County is covered by LAUSD. And LAUSD essentially serves over 800,000 students and has over 26,000 teachers. So you can only imagine the types of influence and power that these folks have that serve as local school board members. Their budget is $7.56 billion, billion with a B. And so decisions that they make truly impact people from pre-K all the way through 12th grade, just serving on LAUSD school board members. And there are not just LAUSD that appears on this ballot, but if I live outside of LAUSD, there are 56 other unified school districts, including LAUSD, that appear on this ballot. So when people talk about, curriculum or educational equity, those are the types of questions that really come into play at that school board level. Who is being served the best by our local school board members? Who are, I would love to live in this world where people have an equal opportunity to an education. That's the principles that this country was founded on, to make sure that people were able to get a proper public education. But when it comes to the different communities in our county and in our school districts, are people getting the same level of education in every single community? I think not. And so it really comes down to representation. Are the people who are serving on these school districts representing your community, your children's best interests? What exactly is being taught in schools? Are they being kept safe right now, just in the sense of this virus, and just in the sense of the access to technology or safe buildings, safe neighborhoods? Those are the types of decisions that are really made at the LAUSD level, at the school board level. So there's actually a 7-member board elected to serve four-year terms that make the decisions about what happens at our community college level. And when you think about the LA Community College Board of Trustees, it's the largest community college district in the United States, and it's the largest in the world, which is crazy. It serves more than 3 million students. And when you think about, LACCD and who's educated on that level, it really serves almost 3 times as many Latino students and nearly 4 times as many Black students than all of the UC system. It's so many people who go there are counties underserved, from our underserved communities. So it's incredibly important who's serving at these at this level. Are they coming from our communities? Do they have a vested interest in our communities? Do they care about the students and what is taught at this level? Are they thinking about a curriculum that's not just focused on one way of thinking, but are they thinking about trade schools? Are they thinking about all these other different areas that people go to community college to seek? Are they creating pathways to larger universities? Are they creating pathways to careers? So these are the types of questions that really come up on this community college board of trustee level. And there's 4 districts that are on this ballot. There's 1, 2, 5, and 7. So it's a really big election in terms of the decisions that are being made at this local level. And not just LACCD is on this ballot, there are 12 total community college boards that are on this ballot. So if you live outside of LACCD and live in a different community college board, like if you live in the city of Walnut, that's really like Mount Sac in that type of area. So just depending on where you live, that's exactly what's kind of on the ballot. And I know you hear if you look at your ballot, there are other races on this ballot. Just so that there's a helpful resource for you, you can actually see the final list of qualified candidates to appear on the ballot at lavote.net. That's a really huge resource for you to see the names of everyone who's on the ballot. So with the community college board district, we were originally thinking, oh yeah, let's list them all. But for some races, there's like 12 candidates on the ballot. And so it became kind of impossible for us to just narrow it down to put it on our guide. But that information is helpful for you to be able to see not just the names of the candidates on each of the it's really helpful for you to see the qualified candidates that are going to appear on a ballot depending on the contest, but also for you to see other races like water districts, like healthcare districts, like library districts. Just depending on where you live, like we said, that's who appears on your ballot. So if you head on to lavote.net, you go back actually to elections, current elections, and it's one of the menu choices that you have for that final list of qualified candidates to appear on the ballot. So to take a step back and think about LA County as a whole and how many people there actually are in LA County. It's the largest county in all the United States. There are over 10 million residents in this entire county. There are, just in terms of voters, 5.8 plus million voters in this county. And when you think about it, there's actually a board of supervisors that is an incredibly powerful set of people who make decisions just about the county. And the county is probably one of the most important safety nets that we as a society have. You know, so many things go through the county, whether it's the jail system, probation, obviously the sheriff's department, DPSS, which is the Department of Public Social Services, you know, all of these social services that we rely on, like homeless, things that battle homelessness, food insecurity. All of these things come to the county, and there are 5 people who make decisions that have a budget of $35 billion. And not a lot of people know and understand how influential this legislative body is and how powerful. Even when thinking about COVID as a whole, all of the COVID testing, all of the health, these decisions based off our health, our county hospitals, they all come from and stem from the decisions that these 5 individuals have. And on this ballot, 2 districts, basically the even numbered districts are on the ballot. And there's a really huge hot ticket item that is on the ballot that really is coming down to the 2nd district. The reason why it's so hot ticket is because it's an open seat for the first time in over 12 years. Because essentially term limits made this an open seat. And there are 2 people that are really well known and pretty powerful that are going up for this specific race. So when it comes down to the decisions that are being made at this level, it's once again thinking about, you know, what are their values and do they match your values in terms of the types of decisions that you want to see at this level. You know, going to the LA County level is also the district attorney race. And I know that, you know, Sarah and I really know and really understand how important this race is. And we have folks who are actually going to be able to describe that and talk to you about how important this race is, especially in 2020.
Yeah, we're really, really excited to have Citizen Creative LA, who is solely focusing on the DA race and how important that is. So we're just going to let them take it away, and we'll see you back after that.
Hello, everybody. Hi, how are you guys? You can't see my wonderful smile. My name's Puno.
My name's Ricky.
And we are part of Citizen
Creative
LA. Okay, the reason why we're acting like this is because we literally made it up 4 months ago.
Yeah, and we haven't actually been in the same room together in 4 months.
Oh yeah, longer than that. Another person who was part of us, she's gonna be right here. Maybe we'll put a picture of her. But we have another member who's part of it, it's Jess. Hey Jess. She's not here right now. She's helping us pick up posters actually. Mm-hmm. But the reason why we're kind of like saying that we just made Citizen Creative is because we did, because maybe 4 months ago, I don't know where you were, but I was like
in the streets protesting.
I was crying at home, just like not trying to do as much research as possible about how we can solve this crazy issue of our criminal justice system. And it all kind of kept leading back to the district attorney position.
Yeah, the district attorney is our top law enforcement official, which we didn't know. I mean, I never really heard of.
I didn't.
Yeah, didn't know anything.
I didn't know what a district attorney was. That's why we had to do that post.
Yeah.
Because we were like, what is a district attorney? I also had no idea who Gascon was. I remember BLM was talking a lot about, you know, bye-bye Jackie Lacey, and I didn't understand why. I was like, is it because her husband pointed his gun at BLM protesters, and like that is a little bit of it, but like there's a lot of things that this woman is not doing right, and we have had her in office for the last 3 terms, I believe. And so we were like, what do we do about this? And you know, people ask us all the time, they're like, how did you get involved? Like, how are you this involved? And it all starts with just DMing. Like, I DM'd George Gascon's Instagram account and was like, how do I help? And then from there, we just got on a bunch of calls and
We reached out to the District Attorney Accountability Coalition and started listening to them and really following their lead for a lot of information. And I think that's one of the things, if you want to get involved, especially now we have a lot of emotions, one of the key things is joining and following an organization. And so even though we created our own thing, which really came out of the need because all of the other organizations that are nonprofits can't actually call out anything about candidates, which is why we didn't know who Gascon was.
Yeah, because you kept seeing BLM and other nonprofits saying like, no Jackie Lacey, and we're like, but then who? And they can't actually legally say anything. They can't endorse a candidate.
Yeah.
So that's why we did our own thing. And then from there, what we realized is that Gascon is the candidate that's going to be a part of the solution for reforming the criminal justice system, but nobody knows about him. I didn't know about him, and I thought he was a white guy. I mean, not that that's bad. Hey, guys.
He's a white passing Latino.
But I was just like, wait, what's going on? He's Cuban dude, yeah. But I mean, otherwise, like there was just a lot of misconceptions about him, and or even also just things that I had no idea that he did before. And the more that we dig into it, the more we understand how important the district attorney's office is, not just in LA, but especially in LA, because, well, let me start all over again. The district attorney's office is one of the district attorney race is one of the most important races right now, because especially in Los Angeles, we have 17,000, well, 15,000 people now incarcerated in our Los Angeles jails. We have
The daily population.
is crazy. The second biggest jail system in the United States is New York with only 7,000. How the heck did we get there? Like, because the current district attorney, Jackie Lacey, believes in tough on crime. She believes sweeping people into jails is the best solution. And fortunately,
It looks like your mask
is
oh, it is? Yes, there you go.
Well, and I think one thing, so Jackie Lacey comes from a punitive culture, so I wouldn't put it all on Jackie Lacey,
Sure.
but she is continuing the pattern of the punitive culture that is pretty standard since the 1970s of criminalizing homelessness, the war on drugs, so many things. And so that's why we believe in Gascon. But I do want to call out that I don't think, like, any candidate, whoever that may be, that they're the one person or solution that's going to be the end-all be-all. Because I don't think a perfect candidate exists.
And then we shouldn't have that, and that's why we want to hold this district attorney accountable even after they become elected. We've realized that if we really want change as citizens, not only do we have to vote, but we also have to continue to hold the people that we elect accountable for what they're doing, which means, unfortunately, that we have to read a schmish ton
Pay attention.
of articles, but fortunately, that's what we're doing for everybody right now on Citizen Creative LA. So if you want to find out more about George Gascon and why we believe, and honestly, it's really nerve-wracking to put, we spent all this time behind this guy.
Yeah.
Because, and there's days where I'm like, yeah, this is it. This has to happen. 33% of people are undecided about the DA. Most people don't even know about the DA race. Yeah. This is really important. And then some days I'm like, oh man, I hope he does it. But if you want to find out more and you want to go with us on our journey, follow Citizen Creative LA on Instagram. We also have a hashtag.
CCLA for LA.
Sorry, we just made it up the other day. CCLA for Gascon.
Yeah.
That's it. And I think it would be really awesome to, wait, let me introduce the Gascon. So anyways, we're really excited because this is the first time that we ever get to interview.
We've been on a lot of panels, we've seen him a lot, and we feel like we know him, but we've never actually gotten to talk to him, and he doesn't actually know us.
No, he has no idea who we are. But so we're really excited to interview him. We only got to ask a couple of questions, but I hope that it gives you a glimpse into what he's all about. So enjoy. Oh my gosh. So I have to say that 4 months ago, I don't know about you, Ricky, but 4 months ago, I had no idea what a district attorney was or who you were. And I was like, I was so mad, especially, obviously June 1st. And I was looking for answers, and everything kept pointing to the district attorney race. Like everything that I was like, this is a huge solution. And so the problem is that not everybody knows what you're all about. And the more that Ricky and I were digging in, we were just like, what? Like this guy already did half of this stuff, and we'll get into that later, but I'm just so excited to be talking to you because the district attorney race is super huge and it's super important. Like what were you looking at when you were researching this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it came about from following and going to the BLM protests every Wednesday. There's a Jackie Lacey protest, but no one talks about who's running against Jackie Lacey. And researching that, we found out because most nonprofits can't talk about candidates. So that's actually why we started CCLA, was so that we could talk about you and kind of fill in that gap of who's running for DA. And because it's just us, we can say whatever we want.
Yeah, we're like, yeah, and, hold you accountable too, right?
Yeah. And in a lot of our research, I think that we found that the DA is the top law enforcement official and actually is the key person that can make change for a lot of the issues that we care about. Everything from environmental justice to how we treat incarceration, homelessness, mental health issues. I mean, the DA has the power to control all of these things.
And the unfortunate thing, though, is that Jackie Lacey, who you're going against, has a good amount of money behind her. Mm-hmm. I actually just did my first phone banking with your team this past week.
Thank you.
But, homie, nobody knows about you. But the thing is that, because we were looking at a poll, and it said that 33% were still undecided. And a lot of people are still voting for Jackie Lacey because she calls herself a progressive.
And we know that she's not progressive. I think Jody Armour's called her out before on air that she's not progressive. She's still for the death penalty. She sentenced 22 people of color to death row. She still believes in treating kids or sending kids to adult court, and as young as 14 and 15 and trying them in adult court. And she actually brags now about bringing in Clear My Record, which I believe is a program you started. It's an algorithm that helps clear people's records. And she says she's the one who brought it, but actually we did a little digging, and it turns out she was not into bringing it until an LA Times article actually called her out for being like, oh, you don't want to bring this to LA, and just reminded people that she was up for re-election. And literally, I think within 2 weeks, all of a sudden, Clear My Record came to LA.
That's right. That's right.
So crazy though, because I mean, you've done so much work, just like Clear My Record, a lot of things that we'll talk about later, but we want to ask you, what, as a DA in San Francisco, what worked in terms of prosecuting police that you would bring in to Los Angeles, that you think will touch upon the things that everybody is mad about right now?
There were several things. One of the things that I'm really proud of is the restorative justice model that we started for juveniles, which I wanted to move into adults, and it was a little more difficult, and then I left. But back in 2014, 2015, and let me put into context, we took all the misdemeanor cases involving kids. And misdemeanor, for those that do not know what they are, they're the low-level offenses. And we took them out of the system completely. So we worked with a nonprofit. We did what is called diversion. And we took all the kids that were involved in misdemeanors and we gave them to this nonprofit. And we found that that really worked much better. And we were not criminalizing children for low-level offenses, which LA criminalizes children for low-level offenses all day long. But then the challenge for me really started with what do you do with serious crimes? And we started to look around and we found a thing called community conferencing, which is really a restorative justice model that originated in New Zealand with the Aborigines. And we looked at it and really felt that this was a wonderful opportunity. And then I wanted to make sure that whatever we did, that there would be a sort of a research-based approach to this so that we would be able later on to see if it worked or didn't. So we partnered with a group of researchers in a nonprofit, the nonprofit to actually do the community conferencing, because we didn't want lawyers in the room. And then we wanted to have researchers actually track the progress. So we created a control group, meaning a group of kids who went through the traditional juvenile system, and the other ones went through what we call the Make It Right program. And understand that in LA County, most of the time when juveniles commit serious offenses, they actually are taken out of the juvenile system altogether and they are put in the adult system, which has very damaging consequences because you have kids ending up in adult prison where they get victimized and it's very, and it doesn't solve the problem. So we didn't do that in San Francisco. We still use the juvenile system, and I still felt that maybe we should get them out of the juvenile system too. And that's how Make It Right comes in. So what happened after about 3 years was that we realized, and researchers kept looking at it, and the kids that were in the Make It Right program were almost 90% of the time successful, which is huge in the criminal justice system, right? Because we generally fail like 50, 40%, meaning failure defined as, people get rearrested, they get convicted of new crimes. So other victims, as well as the young person or the individual gets sucked into the system. So what we realized is that the kids that were going through the traditional juvenile system were still failing at a rate of about 40%. And the kids that were Make It Right were successful at about 90%, or, failing at about 10%. And even the ones that had not done as well, they were considered a failure because they got rearrested. What we found out is generally, and that was a small group, about 10%, that smaller group, generally when they got rearrested for really low level offenses, not the serious stuff that they did before. So even that we consider a win. And then we decided after about 3 years, I said, look, the researchers want to go for another year. I said, no, we can't go any longer because we know that we now are sending kids either to a path of success or a path of failure knowingly. And I refused to do that. The researchers wanted another year because they wanted to publish a real solid academic paper, which I understand. They wanted more data, but we didn't. So I'm very proud of that. And that would be something that I would bring to LA.
How long would that take to implement in Los Angeles?
Well, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to find a partner, which, by the way, the people that we work in the Bay Area, they have a presence here. The nonprofit has a presence in LA County, not for that kind of work, but for other work. So I'm in conversations, and hopefully they will be able to help us here. And then we'll probably, because of the size of LA being so much larger, we'll probably pick a region of the county to start first. And then once we settle the system in, then we'll start moving it throughout the county. But the goal for me will be to certainly within a year or two, move that into the county-wide process. And so we're going to have to work, obviously, find partners. But that will be one of the things that, I think will be incredibly beneficial to our community, and especially to not criminalize kids. By the way, an interesting component to this was that actually our juvenile crime in San Francisco continued to go down more than it did in the rest of the state. So even we were diverting all the low-level stuff, we were now restorative justice with the serious crimes. We continue to see our kids actually doing much better than they do in communities like LA that has a very punitive approach to the work. So it really kind of speaks to the concept that actually more punishment doesn't necessarily equate with more safety, to the contrary. There are other things, we established a tool that we use artificial intelligence to take race out of police reports so that when the prosecutor evaluated a case coming from the police and they got the police reports electronically, we created artificial intelligence with the help of the Stanford computational lab and actually took race out. So when the prosecutor made the first decision how to go with the case, he or she had no idea what the race of any of the parties involved. Police officers, the accused person, the victim, the witnesses. The goal for that, by the way, was to basically tackle implicit bias and take race out of the picture. Now that program was in its infancy. We were in the first year. So I know that the current DA has continued to use it, but that's something that I'd like to bring to LA as well, right? We know that race plays a role, even when people are not intentionally being racist, it's simply because of the implicit biases that we all as human beings have. So we want to start figuring out ways to put guardrails around that so that our work has more purity. That's another thing. And then, of course, I want to get rid of cash bail. So that would be another thing. And then police accountability would be something else that we started there that we will definitely do here. I can go on and on, but I know you have other questions. I don't want to monopolize it.
Yeah, I definitely started with the most broad question.
Well, I think the important thing, and one of the interesting facts I find about a lot of your approach and some of the things you talked about, is you really focus on using science to bring about new change and reform. And that's something that a lot of DAs don't do, is that they continue with the punitive sort of stance on doing things, but you've looked at how the reason, so you were just talking about how we treat youth and affecting how we prosecute kids and whether or not you bring them into try them in adult court. But really, you looked at the science of how children's brains develop and found that they don't actually develop the prefrontal cortex, which controls the impulse controls, doesn't actually mature until 25. So we're charging kids for 25 to life when their brain hasn't even fully developed. And I thought that was some really interesting points of you brought science and data and accountability to your office and a lot of different programs that you've instilled.
Absolutely.
Knowing that a lot of things take time, what reform do you think you can actually make in the first 6 months of office?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ricky. I think that there are several things that we will do just by basically creating immediate policy. So for one thing, we will stop all death penalty cases. So anybody and there are quite a few cases that are now on the death penalty track, they will immediately be converted to another track. We will immediately stop prosecuting children as adults. We know that there are probably hundreds of kids right now that are being prosecuted as adults. That will happen immediately. We will immediately stop seeking cash bail for all misdemeanors and all nonviolent offenders. And then we'll start working further down the lines for the other cases, but this will happen immediately. And then we have already a work group, and you guys may not have seen it, but we actually did some media around it this week. I've been working with a group of lawyers, and especially a retired judge who was one of the inspector generals in the LAPD, and a lawyer that came out of the Civil Rights Division out of the Obama administration. And we have reviewed dozens of police shootings, and we have identified the beginning of cases that we think that would warrant a reopening. And so that work will begin immediately. If I get elected, we'll start looking at those cases. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we have online, but those are kind of things that I know that I can immediately just say, okay, we're doing this as of day one.
In terms of your role as a district attorney, the Los Angeles office is huge. There's 1,000 prosecutors, and then we've got LAPD, which is also the other side of what you have to partner with essentially. And I know that a lot of stuff happened in San Francisco as well that you've probably learned a lot about in terms of making progressive reform happen. But what things do you need to overcome, and how are you going to overcome the current culture in the LAPD and with prosecutors in our current criminal justice system?
Yeah, and that point is kind of the third rail here, but right, the culture is always takes a little longer. But there are things that I will be doing immediately and things that will take a little longer. Number one is really begin the process of, ensuring that people that we put in positions of responsibility are going to embrace a new way of doing business, right? And it will be a little difficult because the staff of the district attorney's office is all civil service protected, right? So you cannot just simply fire them or demote them. But we're going to start moving some people, and that will begin to send a message very clearly. What is the sort of model and the behavior that we want to model, and the one that we don't. Certainly, by some of the policies that we'll write, also will begin to create some guardrails again, prohibition against certain things that will start shifting the culture, and then, frankly, bringing in community into our work, right? Working with partnerships with a wide spectrum of community organizations that have, that really care about this work, and beginning to give them a place at the decision-making table so that we start infusing a different way of thinking about our work. At the same time, as people, and they do in organizations like this, people leave. Some people are going to say, you know what, this is not what I signed up for, I'm going to leave. Other people are just going to retire. As we are backfilling those positions, we really establish a very clear pattern of recruitment that will bring new people in that will embrace this concept and that we're training them accordingly. So it's basically creating policy that, sort of very directive. Certain things are not going to be acceptable. Moving people and rewarding people that embrace a new way of thinking, and then begin the process of hiring and bringing, people that come in with a different frame of mind, and then training and rewarding, and providing, modeling a behavior that will be very different. Now, to the question that you asked, we know that takes time, right? Some of the stuff will happen immediately. I think often organizational experts will tell you that it takes 5-6 years to turn the culture of a large organization around. So we know that we're in it for the long haul, and that's why bringing the community inside the office will be so critical, because that will be an infusion of other thinking, if you will, that will sort of counterbalance the existing culture within the office. With the police department, likewise, we will create certain things that will reward good behavior and will, sanction bad behavior. So police officers lying in their police reports or providing false testimony would be, if appropriate, will be prosecuted. They will not be allowed to provide testimony. Police officers that use force unnecessarily, if their behavior is criminal, they will be prosecuted. So that will begin to start sort of creating some do's and don'ts, if you will. At the same time, working collaboratively with police and community and things that really bring everybody together to create a safer environment.
I was going to say, that's actually one point that I really wanted to bring up that's super important, that I think people really need to understand, is that culture shift and change takes time. So we're trying to move things from a punitive culture. And so I think people need to understand and have patience and realize that no one person, you're not perfect, no candidate is the perfect end-all solution. But you are one of the key, and the DA is a key position in really changing things as we bring in policies, which we know can take decades to bring in. So it takes time to really make these changes, and sometimes it may look like things are getting worse while you're changing a system completely. And so I think people just need to understand that they need to have patience around this.
But I think you've also witnessed that in San Francisco, and I'm curious if you have a different idea about how it could be approached. For example, is it Prop 47?
For misdemeanors?
When there's more car break-ins basically in San Francisco, that is an example of some backlash that might have happened. essentially, anytime there's some progressive reform or experimentation, for example, if we release somebody from jail and then that person later commits a crime, how, like, is there a way that, like, we could, I mean, we kind of get it. We're just like, okay, yeah, that's part of the process. But what are things that you think you can do on your end to help communicate that to the community or alleviate that from the police side?
There's a couple of things. Number one is really aggressively, myself as well as other community partners, talking to actually reform, actually create safer communities, right? So one of the things that we tell people all the time is, look, I mean, crime in San Francisco, violent crime in San Francisco went down as we reduce incarceration. Violent crime in LA went up by nearly 30%, and they incarcerated 4 times the rate. So again, incarceration is not necessarily what defines safety. It's all the other interventions that you work with. Car break-ins in San Francisco went up because after Prop 47, I was one of the co-authors, and the police were very upset. They campaigned aggressively against it, and when they lost, they basically said, okay, we're going to show you. So then there were 81,000 car break-ins in a period of almost 4 years, and they only made 13 arrests. But when we had another chief of police that came in that decided to take a different approach and work with us collaboratively, we immediately started to see car break-ins go down as we targeted, the organized rings that were breaking into hundreds of cars every month, and they were making a lot of money. And that, actually breaking those criminal groups, if you will, and intervening appropriately. It didn't mean that everybody went to prison forever. It just simply meant that we caught him and we started dealing with the problem. So likewise here in LA, what I'm hoping to do is that, hopefully there is enough thoughtfulness around policing in the city that we identify those people that are willing to do the work and understand that doing the work doesn't necessarily mean that we send people to prison forever. It's just simply intervening and, not ignoring the problem, right? And then we can address it on a case-by-case basis. You have somebody's mentally ill, maybe the way you address it is by putting them into a mental health service, right? You have somebody that, is part of a criminal enterprise that are breaking into hundreds and thousands of cars every year, because they're making a lot of money, then we want to take that money away. We want to make sure they don't keep doing that, right? So there are different approaches to the work, but it requires thoughtfulness, it requires nuance to it. And partly, frankly, will require community to come together to educate one another, right? Getting the word out. Sometimes, there are people that if I say something, they may look at it one way, but if you guys say it, they're going to be perhaps more likely to accept it because they trust you. There's a relationship or there's a connection, right? We as human beings tend to connect with things and people that we have things in common with, that we know from before, right? So that's why I find it so critically important to bring the community inside the office to help with the work. Also, frankly, for decades, the definition of safety has been really created by police and prosecutors, often at odds with what many communities define as safety. So, working together to define what do we want safety to look like in our community, right, is really important. Because I find that even when people talk about, like the VA talks about, well, we're here for the victims, and then if you happen to be Black, or if you happen to be brown, if you happen to be a woman, sometimes you get incarcerated if you refuse to cooperate with the prosecution, but you're not looking at the fact that this person may be putting their life in danger if they cooperate with you, right? So you're not there for the victim. So that definition of safety for this person might be very different than for someone else, right? So really working through these things in a way that brings people together, but that brings people together in a way that we try to understand one another and that we do things that actually create more community health, I guess is a way that I like to phrase it, as opposed to safety, because it's really about the health of our community. And I say that not only in the medical sense, but in the broader sense of the word.
I mean, I was, even, you're bringing up community a lot, and I think because we're so in it, we actually see you doing that. Like, for example, reaching out to people who were previously incarcerated and asking about their opinions about what their experience was like with the criminal justice system, talking to people like Patrisse Cullors from Black Lives Matter and bringing her in. So in terms of like, I guess like what I don't want people, their listeners to think when you're saying community, like we've actually seen you actually
Talking to community.
like bringing actually people in.
And I think that a point that you brought up is so refreshing to hear, because in our criminal justice system, from everything that I've learned from the District Attorney Accountability, from the Innocence Project, and all of these other community groups, is how aversive the system is. And to hear a DA candidate talk about public safety and address those that are incarcerated and include those that are incarcerated in the idea of public safety is such a refreshing perspective, and it's really nice to hear because, again, as you mentioned, most prosecutors have a very punitive view of how they're against anybody that gets incarcerated. They can't look at them as a whole person.
Which is why when we all, I mean, I think I voted for Jackie Lacey.
I actually realized I voted for Rachel Rossi.
Well, no, not in the primaries. I voted for you, Gascon, in the primaries, but like in before, obviously.
Yeah.
And then she didn't really do what we thought she needed to do.
Yeah. Well, we thought it was a Black progressive woman because that's what she.
And so I guess that's the question: is how do we hold?
Yeah, how do we hold you as citizens? How do we continue to hold you accountable if you were to get elected, or any DA accountable afterwards?
No, and that's why the concept of first of all bringing community, and I'm glad that you indicated it's not like we're arresting people, bringing them in, right? It's just inviting people to come in and frankly inviting people from a broad spectrum of the community, right? We want all the voices, right? Not just the voices that are going to tell me what I like to hear. Often you see police and, some people in government say, oh, we have a community group. But when you go and look at it, well, it's people that just basically agree with you. You got to bring also the people that do not agree with you and understand why. But, part of that accountability is precisely that, is bringing people together and working together through policy development. And if we're going to disagree, let's not disagree without a clear understanding why. Let's all be at the table and have an equal opportunity to discuss our agreements and disagreements. So that will be part of the accountability. The other part, and I, because you guys know a little bit more about me than many, that, I put on my website, we put a lot of policy stuff. And the reason, and I tell people, look, this is my contract with the community, right? And frankly, often, like campaign staff was very uncomfortable with putting so much specificity, right? Because usually people that run for office don't want to do that because they don't want to be held accountable. They don't want anybody to say, well, wait a minute, you say this, but you're doing that. They want wiggle room. I don't want any wiggle room. When it comes to the big stuff, I want to be really clear. This is what you're going to get if you elect me. If you don't believe in these things, then don't vote for me because we're going to be at odds. But if you believe in these things, then I want you to come in and I want your body and I want your soul because it's going to be that critical, right? Because it's more than just simply getting me elected, right? It's then if I do get elected, as you guys pointed out, this is not going to be a one-person job, right? We all have to work together in this, right? So I put a lot of specificity. Like you say, well, what are you going to do in the first 6 months? And I'm very, very clear. Stop the death penalty. Stop prosecuting children as adults. Look at cash bail. Stop doing cash bail in all these cases. Why? Again, because you'll hear often, people say, well, we're going to study this and we're going to review this. And, and it's a lot of mumble jumble, right? No, I want, just very clear things. Other things obviously will evolve with time. We will learn together what works, what doesn't work. And, evolution is fine. Evolution is the principle of good, I believe, of good public policy.
Did you run away from San Francisco, yes or no?
No.
Can you tell us why you came to LA?
Absolutely. So I think you guys may know this, but, my family's all here. My father died now 7 years ago. My mother's health has really deteriorated tremendously. And for the last year, in San Francisco, as I was engaging in running for the third term, she started to take a turn for the worse, and we were coming back and forth to LA sometimes 4 times a month. It just got too debilitating, and my family basically said, you can't do this anymore. When I announced that I was coming back home, and frankly, I was going to come in and practice law privately and, engage in nonprofit work, people started calling me and asking, would you consider running against Lacey? And that's really what kind of led to my run for office here.
Okay, we're gonna continue with the lightning round though.
Sorry.
I know, I was all like, why did you follow up with it?
Because I thought it was important. People should know.
Okay, no, it's good, and okay, so we'll keep going.
Common or John Legend? I'm just kidding.
Listen, they both endorse me, but I've known John for a long time. I love his music, so I'm gonna say John. But
Okay, Patrice Cullors, is she the reason why you ran?
she was a major reason why I'm here.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. I've been telling everybody, I'm like, this is so cool.
I mean, we've been looking at your stuff so much and seeing your photos so much that we feel like we know you, and sitting in a lot of panels with you, but this is a real treat.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate the support. I really appreciate the questions, and I look forward, if I get elected, to working together, okay?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for wearing the mask, guys, and stay healthy and safe. I want some of those very stylish masks, okay? Take care. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
All right, so thank you guys so much for listening in on this interview. I was actually learned a little bit more about this guy too.
Yeah, and it's so great to connect with him actually in person. What an honor.
Yeah, so if you are ready to endorse your vote, get out that ballot, because hopefully you guys already have your mail-in ballots, and just, go ahead and in the Gascon little bubble.
Fill it out.
You won't be alone. The other people that have endorsed him are Bernie Sanders,
Patrice Cullors,
Elizabeth Warren,
Patricia Arquette,
yeah, Kamala Harris,
Megan Rapinoe,
John Legend and Common. There's a lot of great people that have also endorsed him. You're not alone. We're here too. And thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about the district attorney.
Yeah, please vote.
Vote!
So sticking on the county level for a second, just to talk about Superior Court. So that is one of the biggest questions that people have, like, how do you find out more information about judges? At the Superior Court level, that is basically where all civil and criminal court cases go through on the county level. And there are almost 1,700 full-time Superior Court judges that function in the state, and they serve 6-year terms. And so for this election, there are 3 judges' seats on the ballot. And when it comes down to this, these are the people who are prosecuting folks. These are the people who are making decisions at the civil level, at the criminal court level, about, sentencing, about, who are the type of people and what kind of decisions are they making? What values are they ruled by? In order to get information about the courts and about judges, a really good place to find out more information about them is at the LA County Bar and their website. Essentially, if you look up the Bar Association, it'll basically give you information about whether or not they actually are qualified to be judges, whether or not, what type of decisions that they've made, where they stand on a lot of different issues and how they ruled in a lot of their previous cases as lawyers, and then if they are judges in the past. So that's a really great place to start when you're looking up information about Superior Court judges. Really huge, especially just in terms of social justice, in terms of the justice system, and trying to get a pulse on the types of people who are making decisions and what they stand for. Then to jump into the state level. So on the state level, so state assembly members and state senators essentially make decisions that obviously affect the entire state of California. And then those people are basically represented by, just like it does on the federal level. So you have Congress. In Congress, there's House of Representatives, and then there's senators, right? And it's based off of population. and different types of criteria. So that functions the same way on the state level, except it makes decisions that impact us directly as a state. And so you really want to look into, there are 80 state assembly members in the state of California based off of population, and they essentially serve 2-year terms. So they're constantly on the ballot, and which is really great because if they are making decisions that basically are contrary to, our communities and how they serve us in Sacramento, which is the state capital, that's a great way to be able to hire and fire people that are making decisions on behalf of our community for the state of California. So actually there are a few state assembly races that are on the ballot, just depending on where you live. And then in terms of state senates, like those are actually, there are a few of those on the ballot as well. So just to jump into, obviously, everyone's main show, the main show of the ballot, the US president, we don't want to spend too much time talking about individual tickets, right? The Democrat versus Republican, but just to give you some sense of the presidential candidates that appear on the ballot. So this is a general election, which means that regardless of party, a voter can choose a presidential candidate ticket regardless of political party. So if you hold one certain party affiliation, but you want to vote for the Green Party, Libertarian Party, Democratic Party, Republican Party, American Independent, or Peace and Freedom, you can. But obviously we have in this country, we have what we call a two-party system. And so we have the main parties, the Democrat and Republican. So obviously these presidential candidates, you'll see former Vice President Joe Biden and his running mate, U.S. Senator Kamala Harris, and then on the Republican side, Donald Trump, and then the current Vice President Mike Pence. So flipping the switch back into LA's local measures, this is where I know it gets super confusing. And we hear all the time that the more measures and propositions are on the ballot, the harder it is for people to really wrap their mind around, the different types of decisions and the impacts that each of these different propositions and local measures have. So we really wanted to take the time to really talk about, what people should expect when they open up their ballot, and just in terms of these local measures. So if you live in LA County, everyone will have the opportunity to vote on LA County Measure J, which is essentially the LA County Board of Supervisors way to create a way for our communities to invest themselves into creating alternatives to incarceration, to essentially provide more money in the local budget. So the way that the county supervisors are branding this is a reimagining of LA County. I think, stem based off of the things that are really important and are critical to people in 2020. They really wanted to center a measure around racial injustice and incarceration. So this is actually a charter amendment. So this means that it only needs a simple majority to pass. If you remember, there was a measure that was on the ballot in the presidential primary, but it actually needed a supermajority to be able to pass. So it needed three-fourths of the electorate. And so in this way, it actually only needs a simple majority to pass, so just 50% plus one. So essentially, for people who are supporting this, a yes on this measure is basically allowing for no more than less than 10% of the county's general fund to be appropriated to community programs. So it's really thinking about allowing for more money in alternative programming in our communities, instead of just a pipeline, that prison pipeline that people tend to end up going through in our county system. So it's to reinvest these funds into education, into community programs, into health services, and things like that to help alleviate the way we think about racial injustice. So if people who don't want to support this measure, basically it's around not allowing for more funds and more money to go into these alternative programs. And so just to think about too, just in terms of other measures that appear on the ballot, so depending on where you live, There are, remember we said that there are 88 cities in LA County. Of the 88 cities, 33 of the cities have their own measures on it. So if you log on to lavote.net, that is a way that you can go ahead and find out what local measures are appearing on the ballot depending on where you live. So like the city of Beverly Hills has a measure on the ballot, the city of Santa Monica, the city of Walnut. So just depending on where you live, you can check to see if there are local measures that pertain to you that you actually have the ability to vote on as well. And there's also 8 school districts that have a measure on the ballot, which include LAUSD. So LAUSD, the largest school district in the state, they also have a measure on the ballot, and it's actually called Measure RR. So this actually is an incredibly important measure, just based in the number of money that this will actually increase the budget for LAUSD. So we had mentioned earlier that they actually have a budget of $7 billion, and this measure will actually double the size of their budget to another additional $7 billion to basically go for school upgrades and safety. So they're branding this specific measure, especially around bringing classrooms to the 21st century, and considering all the different types of changes and all the different types of implementations that they have to do for safety because of COVID. This is really to replace and renovate school classrooms all throughout LAUSD. And they really are the way that they're also branding this is that they want to make it better for social equity. So to make sure that all across the school district that people have equal access to these resources, no matter what zip code that they live in. This is something that they're talking about in terms of the way that they're going to implement it. But of course, there's a cost to this. So it's a slight tax increase, and it's basically to purchase this $7 billion in bonds that will be repaid by 2055. So when people are supporting this, they're supporting that they want these school upgrades to happen. They want school safety and the safety measures to be in place, but all of that comes at a cost. And so essentially, people just have to weigh those cost benefits, whether or not they want to have a slight tax increase for this, or whether they're, tired of additional taxes and they don't want this to happen. So those are the types of questions that one has to ask themselves when prioritizing to vote for this or to vote or not to vote for this.
There are a lot of props on this ballot, Laura.
12 California state props.
So do you want to just get into Prop 15? I've been getting a lot of emails about random ones here and there from Uber Eats and other places.
Yeah, the crazy thing about propositions is that we tend to see so many ads on the TV, on Instagram now, on every time we order something on DoorDash likes to remind you of a particular prop that they're obviously have an impact will have an impact on their business. So it's like crazy how much information or lack of information that you might see about a particular prop. And when there are 12 different propositions, yeah, it tends to get super confusing. Like it's a little overwhelming. So I think it's just really important that we just go through them prop by prop. And we can start with Prop 15. So Prop 15 is probably one of the ones that you're gonna see a lot of information about. It's really to have an increase on a property tax to increase funding sources for public schools, community colleges, and local government services. So it is essentially, it's an increase on property taxes. So any property taxes, but mostly just on commercial property. So not residents, not apartment buildings, on commercial properties worth more than $3 million to basically up funding for local governments and schools. So you'll see a lot of nonprofit organizations really pushing hard for this one. It really can align with a lot of what we talked about in terms of the local measure to really put funding into public schools, community colleges, a lot of these government services that people rely on just to alleviate a lot of these social ills a lot of the time that people are talking about. But of course, it's an increase on property taxes. So in terms of people who are supporting this is obviously a bump in taxes, but for services. And then people who are opposing it are really nailing right back into property taxes. Do we need more taxes? We're already taxed high enough. Is this absolutely necessary? That's really what it's juggling. And so this is obviously for the entire state of California. And this is just, these are the things that you need to go ahead and decide.
I guess a quick question about that is then how does like local measure RR and then this coincide? Are we just gonna get taxed and taxed and taxed?
So essentially it is, so that's a really interesting question, because there's that measure RR, which is at LAUSD, and there's that local measure J, which is the county tax, and now there's an increase on these commercial properties. So it's not like there's one taxing source. It's targeting different types of properties or different types of state taxes to allow for different funding sources. So Prop 15 is specifically on commercial properties worth more than $3 million. So that's a very specific tax. It affects a specific amount of people, but it is to have a greater impact on our larger community. So when you think about measure J, for instance, on the county side, that is going to affect a county assessment in the county of LA.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Let's move on to 16.
Yeah. So 16 is it's a really simple sentence. Actually, it is affirmative action. So people know affirmative action as a way to have a direct impact on employment, education, and economic opportunities by allowing the state and local entities to consider race, sex, color, ethnicity, and national origin when making decisions about whether or not you can go to a particular college, some employment opportunities. It's to allow for diversity as a factor when it comes to allowing for job and economic opportunities. So a vote yes is essentially, it's a vote yes for affirmative action, and no is for to maintain the status quo, which is a ban on using affirmative action as a way to make these decisions.
How do you think people are going to implement that? Like, is it more going to be like you see lawsuits after the fact, or like is it like something that you see that you think that people will actually implement? I guess it's just like after it votes yes or no, how does that go?
Yeah, so especially because it's on the state of California, so think about it in terms of like the UCs or a Cal State. So when a person is applying for a Cal State or a UC, this will be implemented as a way to factor in the decision making for allowing someone to be admitted to a college or not. And same thing for like employment practices. So if you're applying to work for the state of California at any level, this will become part of the consideration, the factors that residents in the state of California have to consider. So it's really targeted for, you know, public entities that it will be implemented across the board, just in terms of that decision making power.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. The next Prop 17, I'm really excited about.
Yeah, Prop 17, essentially, it is the ability to restore a vote after the completion of a prison term. So in the state of California, there are some people who obviously when someone is convicted of a felony, you lose the right to vote. And so in the state of California, if you are out of jail, you still have lost the right to vote until a judge essentially gives your right back to vote. So essentially, right after your prison term, it will become automatic if you support this proposition that you will get your right to vote back. So if you vote no, essentially it's that people on state parole would still continue to not be allowed to vote in the state of California. This directly impacts about 50,000 Californians. Wow. So it's essentially whether or not you believe folks who have gone to jail, done their time, are eligible to vote, or whether or not that they should go through their entire parole sentence as well before they get the right to vote back.
I don't know if this applies to Snoop or not, but he didn't know that he could vote because he had a past criminal record. And so this year is the first time that Snoop Dogg is voting. And I think that there are probably a lot of people who fall into that. You know, like there's just confusion and there's like stuff like this that I didn't even know that we had to vote for. That I thought automatically you did the time, like you get to vote. So it's kind of crazy that this is even a prop like that.
Yeah, and that so many people have not been able to vote or did not know that they were allowed to vote, even throughout their parole sentence. So it just kind of makes it really confusing. Like, when do I get the right to vote back? You know, sometimes people automatically think if they get a misdemeanor, they're not allowed to vote. Whether they were convicted of a felony, 10, 20 years ago, and they still don't have the right to vote. So I think this alleviates a lot of confusion. Like, when you are convicted of a felony, go to jail, you come out of jail, you have the right to vote back. This makes it so much less confusing when it comes to getting your right to vote back.
Totally, that's great. And then, a favorite, Prop 18.
Prop 18. So think about it, it's just going to affect, 17 to 18-year-olds with Prop 18. So this is a way to allow for a 17-year-old who is going to be 18 and eligible to vote when it's time for a general election. It allows them to vote in the primary election before they're eligible before they turn 18. So obviously, when someone turns 18 and is a citizen of this country, you have the ability to vote. So a lot of times, especially students may turn 18 in October, which means that they're eligible to vote in a general election. And in a general election, the vote has already been narrowed down, right? So primary elections are really to allow for everybody who wants to run for particular seats to be able to go and run, and then are narrowed down to basically the top two and voted on in the general. So this allows a 17-year-old to vote in a primary election to have the full choice in terms of who they get to vote for in the primary election, and then vote after they turn 18 in a general election.
That's great.
Yeah, so I mean, it really affects a lot of people. It's great to encourage an increase in voter participation. The state of California already allows a 16 and 17-year-old to pre-register to vote, so that once they turn 18, they can go ahead and already cast their vote. They don't have to, register the second they turn 18, like me. That's what I did on my 18th birthday. I registered to vote because that law didn't exist. But now this would allow someone who even pre-registered to vote when they were 16 or 17, if this comes into play, they can already vote for that in a primary, which is I think is a super cool.
Very cool. Okay, let's keep it going.
So Prop 19. So this is another property tax rule. It's so many property taxes, so many rules, so little time, right? So Prop 19 directly impacts local governments that can essentially gain millions of dollars from more property tax revenue per year, but probably growing over time to a few $100 million per year. And this could also affect how much money schools can receive as well. So it's a really nuanced tax law, that directly impacts the homeowners who are over 55 and over. So it's really about people who are older and can inherit properties that can change how much tax revenue they pay. Because some people, they essentially have bought their house back in the 60s, and they've maintained the same property tax value the entire time. Their property taxes have not gone up because of current law. So this prop directly impacts that particular law, that if somebody inherits or moves a property, their tax bracket meets how much money the tax property is actually worth. So people would be paying more taxes essentially for what it's actually worth in 2020, not what they originally bought for in the 60s.
Got it.
Makes sense?
Well, for those 55 and older watching, that's on you, that one. All right. Let's go to Prop 20.
Yeah, so Prop 20, so this restricts parole for certain offenses currently considered to be nonviolent, and authorizes felony sentences for certain offenses to be treated only as misdemeanors. So this is about essentially an increase of law enforcement costs, essentially to allow prosecutors to change and repeat organized petty theft as a felony and require probation officers to seek tougher penalties for those who violate the terms of their parole 3 times. So it really is targeted at people who essentially committed certain theft-related crimes and whether or not they will increase their penalties or not. So it's an attempt for law enforcement to get tough on crime. You know, that law and order is supposed to be a deterrent to crime, and it also will allow law enforcement to require to collect DNA samples from adults if convicted of certain misdemeanors as well. So it actually just really impacts our ability to track crime, to deter crime, to make a tough on crime stance for certain offenses.
That's wild. I'm gonna read into that one a bit more.
Yeah, read into that one because it really it can affect certain communities a lot more than others, especially in terms of, you know, like non-violent offenses.
Right. Okay. I wonder if the DAs, the two people who are running, like have a stance on either yes and no.
Yeah, I definitely know that the LA Times is gonna have an endorsement for or against Prop 20. That's one of the big ones that a lot of newspapers looking into, but a lot of organizations like the ACLU have a lot of thoughts around whether or not you should support Prop 20.
Well, okay, let's keep going.
Yeah, so Prop 21. So this is rent control, something that is, you know, was on a lot of people's minds a few years ago. I know the year we started Back to the Ballot in 2018, this was actually on the ballot and did not pass. So this is another attempt to try to put local governments having authority over not whether they can do rent control on residential property. So rent control can benefit tenants, obviously, by allowing them to decrease the amount of money that they pay a month for their monthly rent. But then it also can impact landlords and how much they can charge. So, you know, especially in LA where we have such high housing costs and our homelessness issues are so high and affordable housing is really hard to find. Rent control is, you know, some folks' answer to being able to provide affordable housing to people, and also, you know, their way to budget every month, to not have their rent skyrocket for whatever reason, whether it's you know, the housing costs or whether it's external factors. You know, it's really able to for families to be able to budget. But then, you know, tenants also have to, I mean, not tenants, but landlords have to charge a certain amount of money for the upkeep of their property. So there really is a really big balance between whether or not you think that rent control is great for you or great for someone else. It just depends on, you know, what you think is the better cost benefit and who should benefit from it.
Right. So Prop 22 is the one that we keep getting emails about.
22, especially our age group, it's everywhere. Like, yeah. I get emails from Lyft, I get emails from Uber. I'm telling you, every time I do a DoorDash order, it pops up because it really directly affects this gig economy question. You know, whether or not these app-based transportation and delivery companies can make their employees, the people who work for them, employees or independent contractors. So, you know, employees, if they become employees of an app-based service, they're entitled to certain benefits. So whether that's healthcare, that's time off, that's a living wage, there's a lot of different benefits that companies have to provide to employees that obviously they don't have to if they're independent contractors. But employees, you know, in order for someone to be an employee, there's a lot more stringent rules around, you know, whether or not when they are, you know, is it a 9 to 5, their hours, when they work, and then independent contractors, you know, they get to consider flexibility in when they want to pay. So right now, if you work for an app, essentially you get to decide when you want to work. You turn on the app, you work when you want to, you don't work when you want to. But then when it comes down to the benefits, you know, they don't have, you know, healthcare benefits from their employers. They don't get certain protections if if they're in an accident or if something happens to their car, who's really covering these costs? Because they're not employees of the companies, it falls on them. So you weigh these things. What is the bigger benefit? Having the ability to receive benefits for stability, or whether or not you can choose when you want to work, but then if something happens to you, it's on you too. So it's in this type of economy, we also have to think about like how it impacts us as well as consumers. So will this increase the price of Lyft and Uber? Will it decrease it? Like what becomes the norm? Because this will directly, what they say is it will directly impact the cost of these things that we benefit from because of the gig economy.
Especially in a place like LA where so many people are independent contractors, right?
For sure. And I think that everyone at some point has done like independent contract work for one reason or another. I think that our reliance on, this gig economy and not having like the stability is something that we've gotten used to, and for the good or the bad. It's just a really good question about like whether or not this has been the benefit for us or where, it's hurting us in a way.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. That's great.
So Prop 23. So I was thinking like 23 kidney. That's how I'm remembering that one. Like when there's so many propositions, you gotta make up ways to remember. So Prop 23 goes to the kidney because it's really about state requirements for these kidney dialysis clinics that are all over our state. It affects about 600 dialysis clinics and about 80,000 patients in California. And it's trying to figure out, if you vote yes for this proposition, essentially these dialysis clinics will have to be required to have a physician on site in each of the clinics at all times. And it also will prohibit these clinics from treating patients differently depending on whether you have private insurance or if you have something like Medi-Cal. Right now, essentially, dialysis clinics have the ability to to reject patients, and they also don't have to have a physician on site, which some people say directly correlates to the type of quality care that people can receive in dialysis clinics. So it's a way to make sure that there are, an even set of healthcare practices, that it's high level of care, no matter what dialysis clinic you go to, and what essentially how, what type of patient are you? Do you have, public insurance? Do you have private insurance? Usually because private insurance brings more dollars, people can obviously take on your case and can reject cases. And so this is just a way to make sure that everyone has the same level of care. But obviously people who are opponents to this are saying that it's going to increase costs and it's going to make it really expensive for people to be able to provide these services. But this is, it's you're weighing quality care versus the quality that costs, right?
Let's keep going. 24.
24. So 24 is one that it is directly impacting consumer privacy laws. And I think that this generation deals with this a lot. Everyone's heard of a cookie. Now, there have been laws passed in the state of California that you have to be notified whether or not a company is mining data from you for whatever reason through these cookies. And so we've all kind of gotten used to opening a browser, being able to see on the bottom of our screen that, they're collecting data on us. But now this is a way to further amend consumer privacy law. So essentially it is, it's to put in place a Department of Justice essentially would put in place an expanded privacy requirement department to really monitor privacy laws. But, I've read a lot about this particular proposition, and, when I first read it, I was like, oh yeah, no brainer, like protect me from privacy, social media and other companies shouldn't be data mining off of me for their gain. But what I've heard is, especially from organizations like the ACLU, is that this could actually hurt people because it sets up rules to be able to not be able to effectively fight if someone is stealing data from So it's just a lot of different things that you have to weigh when in terms to data privacy, the rights the consumer has in terms of whether who should be data mining from you, how should you know, and how do you fight if your data is stolen from you. So it's a really way to enforce these laws and oversee these laws. And so there's just a lot going into this particular law that that can really impact people whether or not you say yes or no.
That's wild. I feel like all of these props are so timely in a wild way. Like in past Back to the Ballots, when we've done different propositions, like it's felt like something that feels really irrelevant, where all of these feel very, very specific and feel very particular to our time and our generation.
For sure. And we deal with the consequences of these particular propositions and these particular laws every day.
Yeah. So the last one. This one too is, I feel like there's been a lot of stuff around this, especially with everything that's going on.
Yeah. So this has definitely been a hot topic of conversation. It's been around the idea of cash bail. So Prop 25 is set to replace cash bail with something that they're calling risk assessment. So bail and bail bonds, especially when someone goes to jail, in order for them to post bail, they can go to a bail bondsman, and essentially pay their way out of jail so that they can not have to wait in jail before they go to trial. But in the way that especially money works, if you don't have the money, if you have to put a mortgage on your house or a second mortgage on your house to be able to await trial, it really is a way to criminalize poverty, especially for people who can't afford bail. And sometimes because of how overloaded our criminal justice system is or how overloaded our courts are, you can wait weeks up to be able to hear for your trial to be heard. So this really puts a stop to this cash bail system. Essentially, people who support this basically say that no one would pay bail in order to be released from jail. Instead, this risk assessment is essentially means that they would either be released automatically or based on their assessed risk of committing another crime, whether or not they can be released or not. So that's really what this condition and this change would be eliminate this cash bail system. So to eliminate, those bail bonds place and Aladdin bonds, all of these different places that you see, especially around, communities of color, to really move into a risk assessment rather than this cash bail way of having someone be in jail because they can't afford it.
That's so wild. It's so wild. Okay, so last but not least, a general obligation bond, sorry.
Oh, so this general obligation bond, so this is just to kind of explain Prop 15, which is a general obligation bond, essentially where, money just doesn't pop out of anywhere. So when people say we want to borrow money, we actually take that money out on ourselves. We pay for a general obligation bond to be able to pay for a lot of money up front. So in terms of Prop 15, it would be to we talked about that $1 billion fund so that it could fund public schools, community colleges, and the like. Well, we have to take out a bond on ourselves and then eventually pay that over with low interest. So that's what you mean by a general obligation bond. It's not just money that pops out of anywhere. It's basically a loan that we take out on ourselves and then pay over time. So when it comes down to like that LAUSD measure RR, that's also to purchase a $7 billion government bond, a general obligation bond, to be repaid by 2055. So it's a certain amount of money, it's a low interest, and you pay it over time. So that's why a lot of people say that, we take out money now and we're going to be paying this off for years and generations to come.
That was awesome. Is there anything about any of those props that you would want to highlight or asterisk or anything that you feel like you want to share additionally?
I mean, I think a lot of these things that we're talking about is exactly what you were talking about, where they really impact our generation, like right on the money, right? And I think that it also is trying to benefit people and allow people to become voters that either would have to wait to become a voter, whether they're on parole, which would eliminate that completely, or would allow them to vote earlier than if they turned 18, because of a loophole. You know what I mean? So it's really about, there's like expanding of voting rights. There's look at ways to look at law and order, and then there's these very particular laws that can affect a certain amount of people, like the kidney dialysis law, but also has a direct impact on healthcare and what our priorities are for providing quality care. So there are many and a lot of property taxes and a lot of different level property taxes paying for these things that directly impact our communities. And so, us as voters, it's our decision to really decide how government funds could be used and how they should be used. And so that's really what this is putting that control back into the hands of the voters to really set the agenda of how people should be treated and how, and what services people deserve or don't, based off of how much money they cost.
Yeah, that's awesome. Laura, I just want to say thank you again on camera with everyone here. There is no Back to the Ballot without you. There is no voter education event without you. We're so grateful for your expertise. We're so grateful that you cared about voting since you were 4 years old, and that on your 18th birthday you went to vote so that we could have this information through you. Thank you for just making it clear, more clear, for people who are purposefully trying to make it hard. And I think in addition to that, it's like what you said, I just want to reiterate. If our vote didn't matter, if only the federal, election and the presidential election mattered, voter suppression wouldn't be as high as it is. The USPS, the conversations we're having around that wouldn't be the conversations we're having today. So regardless of how people vote, regardless of what side you stand on, just vote. We're so grateful. So thank you so much, Laura, again. And yeah, we appreciate you. Thank you so much to our sponsors, X-Girl, PF Candles, and Beauty Counter. We're so, so grateful, and we really couldn't have done this without you guys. So thank you 1,000 times again. Also, we want to say thank you to Laura, to Patty Sa, who actually donated this venue. It was supposed to be her wedding venue, and it's not, but she said this is her petty activism, so you guys should get up on your petty activism as well. Thank you to our crew, and thank you just for tuning in with us tonight. Hopefully, you learned something that you didn't know, and hopefully it's something that you can share with other people as well. I'm going to now introduce Free J Boozy Trio, who are going to take us away on a jazz-enriched rest of our time together. Just remember to keep yourself healthy. Remember to keep yourself safe, everyone. And we're just thankful to have them and all the speakers that we had today.